Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Alex Hutchinson. He is a National Magazine award-winning journalist, a former long-distance runner for the Canadian national team. He has a master's degree in journalism from Columbia, a PhD in physics from Cambridge. He did his postdoctoral research with the National Security Agency, and he's the best-selling author of a very popular book called Endure: Mind, Body, and the Curiously Elastic Limits of Human Performance, and the brand new book, which is coming out that I had a chance to review, called The Explorer's Gene: Why We Seek Big Challenges, New Flavors, and the Blank Spots on the Map. Alex, thank you for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Jacob. I really appreciate the chance to be here.
So, tons of questions for you, but as somebody who's a little bit of a health and fitness nut myself, I thought we would blend a little bit of the health and fitness component with the leadership and the business component, specifically at work. So why don't we just start with just a little bit of background information about you, because obviously you were a long distance runner for the Canadian national team. So how did you get into looking at exploration? The endurance piece I totally get, because it's probably a big part of what you had to do. Why the idea of exploration?
Yeah, so I guess the quick timeline is I started out as a journalist in like 2006, and I ended up kind of merging my interest in science and endurance or sports to write about the science of endurance. And I spent basically 10 years reporting on that area. I didn't realize it was going to become my specialty, but it really became my specialty. And so my focus got narrower and narrower as a freelance journalist. And that culminated with this book, Endure, that came out in 2018. And Endure did really well. Like I was super, super happy with the reception. And all of a sudden I had this, basically this opportunity of like, oh, I could be the science of endurance guy. This could be my thing. And I could kind of ride this horse off into the sunset for the rest of my career, going around giving talks and writing articles about the science of endurance. And that was kind of like the dream job for me. Like when I'd started out as a journalist, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could like make a living writing about kind of running and endurance and science? And there it was. But I found myself thinking, but I actually, now that it's here, that's not what I want to do. I want to do something else. And then the question is, what else do I want to do? I don't know. I don't know what else I want to do, but I know I don't want to just write Endure 2, Revenge of the Endurance, of the Science of Endurance. I want to explore something else. So that got me thinking about, why are we drawn to the road less traveled, or the things we don't know about? And I realized it's kind of a universal thing, that it's something that underlies our behavior from the very like microscopic decisions like what to order in a restaurant to big decisions like career and family and things like that we're always wrestling with this tension between sticking with the known and venturing into the unknown. And so I was interested in why I was wired this way, and decided that actually that's what I wanted to explore.
Very neat. Okay, so before we jump into some of the concepts from the book, I know you've also appeared on a lot of fitness and health podcasts. You're on Peter Attia's podcast, and you've talked a lot about fitness and health. And even people I know that listen to this podcast, even though it's about leadership, I have a lot of people who are very interested in health and fitness. A lot of the CEOs that I even interview on the podcast, they always tell me that a big part of their regimen, their routine, is exercising, eating healthy, making time for different things. So the first thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is this idea of exercise, cold plunge, sauna. This is obviously a very big topic of conversation, especially in the workplace, right? Because the idea of well-being is a topic of conversation in pretty much every organization. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, the exercise, cold plunge, sauna. Is it as good as drugs, right? Can you do this instead of taking antidepressants? Where do you stand on that whole debate?
So first of all, I'll just, by way of background, I'll say I definitely see the parallels between like exercise and leadership. I think there's a lot of synergy in these topics. That
huge.
There's a reason, like, to be a great leader, you need to be physically fit and healthy and mental and have mental acuity. But deeper than that, it's also like the experience of training, of doing exercise, I think, and sticking with a routine. These are like, it's like a laboratory for learning about yourself and your ability to overcome challenges. So I think it's not surprising that there's a big overlap in your audience of people who are great leaders who are also interested in this stuff. Now, into the 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 wellness industrial complex, the ideas.
I like that name for it.
Yeah. So maybe first thing I'll say is there's obviously tons of evidence that exercise is fantastic for every possible thing you can think of. There is good evidence that, that heat in the form of saunas can do interesting things to your body. There's obviously evidence that cold plunges do things too. They alter your, what's going on inside your body and correspondingly what's going on inside your mind. All of these things have some evidence. What I would say as someone who has, I guess it's been about 15 years now that I've been writing about the science of fitness and endurance and exercise, that what I've seen is things come and go. And even when they have good evidence. So a good example would be like ketones were super, super hyped about, let's say 10 years ago.
I tried that diet for a little bit, the keto diet. And then I went to my doctor. And my doctor's like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm doing this new diet, the ketosis, eating a lot of fats. And my doctor was like, you got to stop that right now. Your cholesterol is through the roof. Like, I need to put you on medication. And I'm like, oh, I guess I should probably stop doing that. Because I was eating tons of saturated fat, like coconut manna, meats. I was eating all sorts of just stuff that I usually would never eat. And my doctor was not happy with that. And I know it works for some people. And maybe if I would have kept going with it, who knows? Maybe it would have worked. But yeah,
I think your experience is, yeah, like you said, it's actually, a ketogenic diet has been fantastic for some people. It doesn't seem to be a universal cure-all. And I think that's maybe a good general message to keep in mind. So I'll say, okay, cold plunge. Ice baths were all the rage when I was in college in the 1990s among athletes. So the football team had ice baths set up in the training room, and I was a runner, so we used them too. So after hard workouts, we'd go do ice baths.
So this isn't a new thing here.
Yeah, this is the 1990s. We had a special ice bath, and we would go use them after workouts, and it made us feel so much better the next day. Now, when I got into this writing about the science of endurance, I was like, oh, let's check out the research on ice baths. And it turns out the research on ice baths is they makes you feel better, but it doesn't actually enhance your recovery for the most part. And in fact, it mostly seems to be, the feeling better mostly seems to be a placebo effect. And if you push it beyond that, actually, it turns out that in some situations, the ice bath actually interferes with the fitness benefits you get from exercise. Basically, when you exercise, you're imposing a bunch of stress on your body. You're causing damage. You're causing oxidative stress. You're getting inflammation. And all of that stuff serves as a signal to your body to rebuild and make your muscles stronger, increase your endurance. The ice bath, actually, the good thing about ice baths is they can kind of counteract some of that inflammation and some of that stress. The bad thing is then you've gotten rid of the stress. That was the whole point of your workout, was to stress your body so that your body would adapt and get fitter. You're reducing that stress so then your body doesn't adapt and you get less benefits from the workout. So there's a price to pay if you are too good at eliminating the stress of the workout. I think this is not like a huge effect. This is not like, hey, you do an ice bath, you're not going to get fitter. But it's just a reminder that kind of there's no free lunch. Right? Yeah. The things have positive and negative effects. So I haven't really given you an answer to your question. I'll try and boil it down. What I would say is there's interesting evidence that cold baths and saunas can do useful things for your body. What they may or may not do is like noise on top of the signal. The signal is exercise. Exercise is doing most of the work here. If a cold plunge at the beginning of the day helps you feel alert for the rest of the day, that's fantastic. But it is not on the same order of magnitude in terms of importance as the exercise itself.
Here's a good question for HR leaders everywhere. In the 2 years since AI went mainstream, how much has it empowered you to actually improve employee engagement? How about well-being? Or to achieve cultural transformation? The truth is, HR is under more pressure than ever. But most AI solutions are a waste of your time, budgets, and bandwidth. You need a smarter kind of AI that answers your most critical questions. Enter human intelligence from WorkHuman. By combining AI with the rich data of their #1 rated employee recognition platform, WorkHuman's intelligence unlocks insights and capabilities that redefine talent management, cultural transformation, and employee engagement. Human intelligence puts answers at your fingertips to questions like, who in marketing is a flight risk? Where are our talent or skills gaps? Who are our next generation of leaders? Or how do we build engagement? Learn about human intelligence at workhuman.com and join their force for good. That's workhuman.com. And it's interesting because when I talk to a lot of chief human resource officers or even leaders of organizations that are investing in well-being programs, and I always ask them, well, why are you investing in a lot of these programs? And I've had a couple chief human resource officers tell me that they view these things as performance enhancers. So they kind of view their employees in a lot of ways like athletes. And so if you're, for example, playing for a basketball team, you're a LeBron James, you're Serena Williams, whatever it is that you're playing, you get access to a lot of great resources, whether it's mental coaching resources and how to be tougher, how to push through, whether it's physical resources like gyms and a healthy food, whatever it is. You're constantly getting access to all these top-notch resources that cater to all aspects of your body. Your physical well-being, your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being. Meditation has been a big part for some of these athletes. And so it's really interesting to hear that so many leaders now inside of organizations are viewing their employees as athletes in some way, and that these well-being programs are designed to unlock their performance at work. But I always have doubts on the impact that these things have. Is there diminishing returns? What role does the organization play versus how much accountability should the employee have as themselves? So there are a lot of questions that I have about that space, but it's at least very interesting to see the relationship between kind of the athlete peak performance and the employee peak performance. Do you have any thoughts and feedback on that as well?
Yeah. So I'll say one of the things that I found really interesting after Endure came out in 2018, which was a book about really like the limits of endurance, and it was mostly about running and stuff like that. It got a lot of interest from people in the business and management and leadership community, which I think speaks to your point that leaders are human resources. People are thinking about both themselves and their teams as a team of performers, and performance is a broad thing. Now, if you invest in wellness programs, what is the return on that investment? I will say some things probably have better return than others, like access to a gym. I mean, access to showers. One of the conversations I have with people a lot is like, oh yeah, I love biking to work or walking to work or something, or doing a workout in the morning, but then I have to like shower at a sink in the bathroom. It's like give people facilities so that they can exercise, or if they can go for a workout at lunch, not without having to belong to a gym. So, drive to a gym, just they can go for the desk and go get some exercise. So showers, a basic facility, an exercise room, like a weight room with some equipment and stuff like that. That's great. That's going to be way better than like a hyperbaric chamber that allows you to do some fancy stuff. But I would also say buying a weight machine compared to thinking carefully about the demands that you're making on your employee, thinking about recovery. Like why is it that pro sports teams have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of fancy recovery gear? It's so that their athletes can recover. And so I don't think wellness programs are a solution for poor work culture or excessive demands on employees. I think you have to, if you respect your athletes or your workers as athletes, you need to respect what they're capable of in a long-term basis.
Yeah, and also the mental and physical aspect of it. I'm trying to figure out what requires more recovery, right? So, for example, if you do a marathon or an ultra marathon, and you've done a lot of these, how much recovery time do you typically need after you do one of these races or a big hike?
Yeah, so I mean, for something like a marathon, it would be weeks before I would, I wouldn't try and run at all for, I don't know, a week. And then it would be weeks to maybe even a month before I was getting back to the level of training that I was doing prior to the marathon.
Okay, so now I'm wondering on kind of the mental aspect, right? Because we keep hearing about burnout for employees. And sometimes I wonder if we even really know what burnout means or is. Because some people assume burnout is just kind of like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired today. Whereas for other people, it's literally like you shut down. And so if it takes you that long to recover from something physical, I don't know if there's any data or research that's been done that talks about how much recovery do we need from a mental perspective, right? Because and I'm sure you do as well, if you're going out and giving a speech and you're traveling all day, you probably get mentally exhausted. But then if you get a good night of sleep, if you exercise the next day, you kind of feel like you're good, right? So sometimes you feel like you can get back in the game. You don't need a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks, before your next speech. Sometimes you can do a couple back to back. So is there a relationship between kind of the mental recovery and the physical recovery piece? It seems like the physical takes longer than the mental.
Yeah, if you run a marathon, you're basically tearing your muscle fibers. But I think
Yeah, exactly. So you physically cannot do anything.
I think that an important distinction here is the difference between acute and chronic stress. Like, did you do something that was really hard for 3 hours or 2 hours or 5 hours? Or have you been basically low grade pushing it for the last three months or whatever?
Yeah, is it every day? Yeah.
And so something that I think is useful to think about from the athletic perspective is there's a seasonality to sports competitions, whether it's major league teams or the Olympics or whatever. There's a preseason, there's the regular season, there's the playoffs, the pressure's ramping up, then there's the championships. And then you take like these are the best paid athletes in the world. They're taking like 4 months off. They're not taking 4 months of not exercising. It's not the 1950s anymore where they go and like work in the bank on the off season. They're still training for sure, but the mental side, the pressure is off. And so I think for knowledge workers, it's like you can have a big deadline which requires them to put in long hours and high stress, but you just can't do that every week. You have to. There has to be a seasonality, whether it's a monthly or weekly or whatever. Whether it's you're an accountant, it's tax season is crazy, but then after tax season you take time off. There has to be some way that the recovery from a hard thing, whether it's mental or physical, can be quite quick if it was a limited period of hard thing. The recovery from 6 months of grinding is going to be a lot more serious.
Yeah, and I can relate to that because I've had jobs in the past where I would show up to work every day and I would just get that pit in my stomach and I would just not want to go into the office, and it was just, I felt like I was draining my life until finally I quit. But it was, months and months of that, and until finally I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, I'm done. So I think that's a very good point. There is a big difference between kind of ongoing chronic stress or feeling disengaged versus I just had a tough day today, or man, I'm exhausted today. Those two are not the same. I'm curious, what's been the most challenging endurance activity you've ever done?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that probably for me, so my background as a runner was as a middle distance runner. So that basically I'm a miler running events that are like 4 minutes long. So I ran a marathon a little later in my 30s, and my body's not cut out particularly well for the marathon, but because I had a running background, I was fit enough that I could run pretty hard. And as a result, I was fit enough to really hurt myself, put it that way. And I couldn't walk for like a week. It was brutal.
Wow. My wife did one marathon, the Nike women's marathon in San Francisco a while ago. I've never done a marathon just because after like 3 miles, I find that my body starts hurting a lot. Because I played a lot of racquetball and sports like that, but doing those long distance runs are brutal.
Yeah, that's
well, kudos to you for doing one in your 30s and kind of making it past.
I wanted to know what it was like. I did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done some pretty intense like backpacking trips where it's over a much longer period of time, just going for hour, but that's different than the marathon was like a lot of suffering packed into a few hours.
Yeah, for me, the longest hike I did, it was for a few days. It was in China. It was the Tiger Leaping Gorge.
Oh, wow.
So we survived on Snickers bars. Like right before you get to the gorge, you have like a little market there, and everyone's just saying just buy Snickers bars because it's got the nuts in there and the caramel and the chocolate. So I would just me and some of my friends we just powered through on Snickers bars. It was great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are the greatest adventures. But
Yeah,
anyone who's taking notes on sports nutrition here,
you don't eat Snickers bars as you're
Snickers
going
is
on a math.
okay, but don't survive exclusively on them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm also curious. One more thing on fitness, and again related to the business and leadership world, is the idea of Zone Two training and VO2 max. So, I guess people who are not familiar with Zone Two training, can you explain what it is and what is VO2 max, and then we can kind of tie that back to business and leadership because I see a lot of parallels there.
Sure. So zone two training, it's really associated pretty closely with Peter Attia these days. It's something he's really
Yes.
promoted, and uh, it's the idea of accumulating a whole bunch of training at a relatively easy to moderate intensity. So you're not going out. Let's say you're running, which is my sport. You're not going out and hammering every day. You're going at a conversational pace, a pace at which you could sustain a comfortable full sentence conversation. You'd be feeling a little strained, but you could carry on a conversation. And he suggests you should try and accumulate at least 3 hours of this kind of exercise per week, which is substantial. And then he says that's not enough. You also need to do some hard VO2 max style workouts. Now VO2 max is it's a measure of the size of your aerobic engine. It basically, what it literally means is how much oxygen can you suck in to your lungs, get into your bloodstream, pump to your muscles, and deliver to your muscles when you're exercising as hard as you can. And so he suggests doing, his Peter Attia's advice is 4 times 4 minutes as hard as you can with a 4-minute break. So it's very different from the zone 2 easy stuff.
Yeah, the 4x4s they're tough as hell.
Yeah, they should be. If they're not, you're not doing it right. Like
Yeah.
unlike zone 2, where if it feels really hard, you're also not doing it right. You should be doing it in a way that's sustainable. So this is been framed as a radical new way of exercising. It actually mirrors pretty well the way endurance athletes have trained for several generations. There's an idea that's become known as polarized training, which is based on the observation that most endurance athletes spend about across sports, whether you're talking rowers or runners, cyclists, triathletes, and so on, spend about 80% of their time going relatively easy, what Peter Attia would call zone 2, and 20% of their time going basically to see Jesus, working really hard. And that seems to be a good balance where you can accumulate a lot of exercise or a lot of volume of training, but also you get the hard stuff and you get the accumulating a bunch of volume in it. That I think that the 80-20 parallel to how you think about other aspects of your life, including work, is it kind of jumps out because you can't go all out 100% of the time.
Yeah, and kind of the way that I think about that is work styles as well, right? Because you do need some zone 2 training at work where you kind of have those consistent days. And then similarly, you also need some of the days where you're doing those 4x4s where you're sprinting and you're going crazy. So I recently bought one of those air bikes. So I bought a Rogue, I think it's called the Echo 3 bike. And oh man, that thing it just destroys me. And I know that when I go on there, sometimes I try to pedal hard, and if you go all out, you probably can't go longer than like 30 to 60 seconds. Like it's really, really hard to go longer than that. But it's also not sustainable to do that every day. So I try to balance, some kind of constant, slow, regular momentum for a couple times a week, along with the, go nuts. And I think the same thing is true at work, right? Where you also need to have that kind of fine balance between those two. So there's a lot of relationship, I think, between how we train physically and mentally, and also how we show up to work every day. And so the zone 2 training, I think there's been a lot of research, right, that shows that's actually one of the most effective ways to train.
Yeah. I won't go too deep down the rabbit hole here. I'll say I just actually wrote an article on zone 2 training for the New York Times, kind of
I know that's
really
why I'm
digging
asking you.
into
I
the
just saw
research.
it.
Um, The idea that you should do a large volume of moderately hard training, I think that's well supported.
Yep.
Some adherents of zone 2 get very, very specific about it. It's like, it's got to be just at this point before your lactate starts to go up, when your fat oxidation is just at the, so there, it's like, it's not just any easy to moderate training. It's a very narrow zone of, it's kind of the magic zone. I would say that the evidence supporting this view that you have to be at exactly the right intensity is weak. And so I think that's good news, because what I would say is well supported is the idea that this relatively easy zone, this zone where you can still be conversational, is extraordinarily effective, and also gives you room to bounce back the next day and still be standing, not be like lying in bed saying,
Yeah.
and you know, to your work analogy, it's like, that's a day of work you can do and not get home feeling like you hate the world and you can't go back to work tomorrow.
For people who are listening and watching this and they're thinking, well, why is this relevant to me? I have a job. Why do I need to exercise or eat healthy or do any of this stuff? Have you seen any data that supports that taking care of yourself allows you to more effectively take care of others, make better decisions, um, collaborate better, be more creative? Like, why is it so important, I think, especially for leaders and in the workplace, to also look after these things and pay attention to these things, whether it's mental, whether it's physical? How does it relate to how you actually show up and get your job done?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I would say wanting to stay alive in the long term is a good motivation, even outside of work.
Yes.
But if your perspective is, I'm going to put in my hours on the job, and if I keel over at 65, who cares? The important thing is that I maximize performance.
I'm too busy, right? I'm just focused
Yeah.
on work. I don't have time to exercise or anything like that.
Yeah. So actually, I'm in the middle of researching an article right now on the links between exercise and brain health, like brain function, fluid intelligence, being able to, working memory, all the creativity, all these things. And I want to be cautious, because there is a tendency among people like me, fitness journalists, to be like, exercise does everything. It'll change the oil in your car. It'll do this. It'll do that. It'll turn you into Albert Einstein. And the evidence is it's not like you go for a run and all of a sudden you're solving differential equations or whatever. But both in the short term and in the long term, you go for a run, or do some exercise. It doesn't have to be a run. I'm just a runner, so pardon my use of running all the time. But
We forgive you.
you go do half an hour of exercise at a moderate pace. You come back. If you write a cognitive test, you'll perform better. Your brain function is improved. And in the long term, if you exercise on a regular basis, the size of key regions of your brain and the wiring between different regions of your brain is going to improve. Or as you get older, it's going to hold steady instead of declining. Because most of us, as adults, the reality is every day we're losing neurons, basically. It's a long, slow process of decline. Exercise fights against that very effectively. So are you going to be able to measure this? Are you going to be like, okay, we're going to have Jim exercise 5 times a week, and we're going to have Steve not exercise, and we're going to see that Jim is going to achieve twice as much by the end of the quarter as Steve? No, these are going to be subtle things. But I think you can tell when you're clicking, when you're doing good work, when you're thinking clearly, that it may be hard to measure, but you're going to be making better decisions. And there's good data showing that exercise, both in the short and long term, improves brain function. Now, even that, I think, is just part of it, because, man, if you're dealing with aches and pains, and you're unwell, you're going to have more trouble focusing on your job. It's not that if you exercise, you're going to wake up every morning feeling like $1 million. That's not the reality of it. But in the long term, on average, if you take care of your body and take care of also your broader lifestyle, having enough recovery, getting enough sleep, eating well, all these sorts of things, you're just going to have more time where you're clear-minded and working on your problem, instead of sitting there wondering, why your stomach hurts or why you're so tired and can't keep your eyes open.
I mean, for me, I've noticed a huge impact. I mean, I exercise usually 5 or 6 days a week, and like I can't it's very hard for me to start my day or to do the things that I need to do if I don't get my workout in, especially if I don't get it in first thing in the morning after I take the kids to school. Like it's very hard for me to exercise in the afternoon. I usually got to do it right in the morning. Then I eat, then I start my day. Otherwise, I just find that I'm just not, I don't know. It's very hard for me to be at my best and do anything.
I'm 100%. I'm the same as you. I have to do it early in the day. And if I don't do it, it's not going to, I just don't feel right. Now,
not the thing.
You could ask whether is that just like drinking coffee, where it's like if you're used to drinking coffee, you need to drink coffee to get your day started. But if you never drank coffee, you would never notice that you weren't drinking coffee. I think there's more to it than that. But it's like there's something to be said for routines, and if you can get into routine like you have and like I have, it no longer requires a ton of effort to get your workout in. You don't have to decide. You've just like, oh, this is what I do because this is how I start my day, or this is how I finish my day, or whatever. You establish a routine. It's not a big burden as it is if you're just every day you're like, should I exercise today? No, you just do it.
Do it, make it happen, just like Nike says. Let's talk a little bit about some of the themes from your new book. Obviously, exploration is a big theme in there. How do you define exploration? Because some people might think it's, I don't know, I'm listening to a new podcast. I just do something I wouldn't usually do. Do you have a specific definition of what exploration means?
I have a deliberately vague definition, which is to try and encompass, because it's not just like, am I going to sail across the Atlantic and try and discover a new, or am I going to like parasail to the North Pole or something like that? But it's also not just like, oh, I'm really interested in finding out whether this coin will be heads or tails, so I'm flipping a coin. That's not really exploring, even though there's uncertainty. So it's taking a deliberate action or making a choice to pursue a lesser known option, to rather than to stick with what you know, to try something where you're not sure what the outcome is, where it might be better than where you are right now, but it might also be worse. That's important. And you're making that choice in an effort basically to learn about the world. You're trying to find something out or discover something. So the key point there is that you're opting for the unknown. You're taking a chance.
And why is that important?
Yeah, that's a deep question. I have 7 chapters on that. So yeah, no, it's. I think there's 2 ways to answer that question of why it's important. One is that it gives you good things. So one of the classic ways of thinking about exploring is like, or sort of the toy examples is, you're at a restaurant. Do you order? It's a restaurant you've been to many times before. Do you order the burger, which you always order because you know it's pretty good? Or you see, oh, they have a special. Should I try the special? It might be better. It might be worse. And the ordering the special is you're exploring, you're taking a chance. So if you look in real world data, so Harvard scientists analyzed 1.6 million orders from a food delivery company called Deliveroo to try to understand what factors led people to how they chose what to order and how it turned out for them. And what they found is when people ordered from a new restaurant that they'd never tried before, they were likely to rate the meal lower than if they stuck with one of their old favorites. So exploring in the short term had a cost. It's like, oh man, by trying the unknown, I got a worse meal on average. But the thing is, in the long term, if you look at their ratings, when people order a lot of, repeatedly, their ratings gradually go up and up and up. They're getting better and better. And the reason is they're discovering better restaurants. So when they explore, sometimes they get a worse meal, in which case they never go back to that restaurant. Sometimes they get a better meal, in which case now they have a new good restaurant for their rotation. And so their overall portfolio of choices is better. So the first answer to your question is we explore because even though we take a risk of a bad outcome in the short term, in the long term, by exploring consistently, we get better and better outcomes. The second answer to your question, I think, or the second way of answering it is to say, because it's fun, it feels good. We're wired to enjoy that feeling of discovering something new, of venturing into the unknown and learning about the world. That feels good in an almost addictive way. So we do it because it's fun, but we also do it because it leads to good things.
HR just changed for good with the introduction of human intelligence. By combining AI and the uniquely authentic data of WorkHuman's #1 rated employee recognition platform, Human Intelligence helps you discover what good looks like in your company, with previously unobtainable insights into skills, performance, culture, and more. Human Intelligence also helps coach employees on what good peer-to-peer recognition looks like, turning every good job into better engagement, retention, and well-being. And it helps surface feel-good stories that illustrate the best of your company culture. In short, it's how today's leading companies are turning AI into a force for good. Learn about human intelligence at workhuman.com. That's workhuman.com. Do you find that the older we get, the less we explore? Because I have two kids, for example, a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I find they're very curious, especially the little guy, the 4-year-old. And part of it, I think it's because he's young and he's 4, but also he's just very curious in general. He always wants to know how things work, why they work, why something's plugged in, why something's not plugged in, you just nonstop questions about everything and anything. But it's funny because I noticed that as I got older, I stopped asking similar questions about things that I still don't know the answers to. And in fact, I actually bought a book. It's sitting next to me recently, and it's called Structures. It's this one here. Or Why Some Things Fall Down, and or why things don't fall down. So Structures or Why Things Don't Fall Down. So it's this really cool book. And partially I bought it because he's always asking me like, how does this work? How does that work? How do you build this? How do you build that? And I realized that I used to ask a lot of similar questions when I was younger, but as I got older, I stopped asking those questions. Like, how do bridges work? How do some of the things that we take for granted that appear all around, how does electricity work? How do currents work? Why is it that electricity shuts off when you flip off a switch? Like, we take a lot of these things for granted without actually knowing like the mechanics, the inside of how these things actually work. And so my son has really pushed me towards asking me these things. And he likes to watch YouTube videos on how to build a house. How do you build a train? And I don't know why. Is it because the older you get, the more experience and knowledge you get, and therefore you feel like you need to explore less? Is it time? Like, what is it that causes us to stop being explorers the older we get?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my kids are 8 and 11 now. So as I was writing this book, they were basically the age your kids are now. And I think they had a big influence on why I was interested in this topic and the way I was thinking about it. And so the short answer is we explore less as we get older. That's an easily demonstrable fact.
Yeah.
The question is this like a good idea? Is this just normal, or should we be fighting against it in the same way that we might say, oh, we're less physically active when we get older than we were as kids? Well, that's a bad choice. We should fight against that. What about exploring? There are some reasons that it makes sense to explore less. One is that the longer you have to enjoy the rewards of exploring, the more valuable it is. So the younger you are, the more it makes sense to keep trying to find, when you're a freshman in college, you should make as many friends as you can, meet as many people as you can, go out and mingle, because then if you find your peeps, then you're going to enjoy hanging out with them for the next 4 years. When you're in your last semester in 4th year or whatever, it's not that you should become a hermit, but there's less benefit to meeting someone new because you're moving away in 2 months or whatever. So the same is true across a lifespan. It makes sense to learn about the world and about yourself when you're young. And kids seem to be wired that way. Like if you run controlled experiments, they're more exploratory. They want to find out what's over the next hill more than adults do. And it still feels a little bit sad to say, oh, then I should stop exploring because I'm going to die soon. That's not a very encouraging way. And I don't think that's quite right. I think adults should keep exploring, but we have to understand it's never going to be quite the same as when we were kids, because we do know a lot about the world. Kids ask a lot of questions in part because they don't know stuff. And so as adults, we know stuff about the world, but also about ourselves. So one of the scientists I spoke to, one of the examples he gave is like, if you move to a city for the first time, then everything is new and interesting to you. You don't know how that city works. But if you've been living in that city for 5 years, then let's say a new, coffee shop opens near you, and you can look at it, and because you know about the world, you understand how the city works. You're like, oh yeah, that's going to be the hipster coffee shop. And I hate hipster coffee shops. Therefore, I'm not going to go into that coffee shop. You don't need to explore it because you can't unlearn what you know about the world. So there's things you're no longer a blank slate. So having said all that, I think it's true that we tend to dial down exploring probably more than we should, and that it takes a conscious effort, just as it takes a conscious effort to stay physically active in the face of the demands of parenthood and careers. As when we're adults,
Yeah.
we have all these demands on our time. If we have time, then we'll go out and play, and we'll go out and be physically active. I think exploring more as an adult is step one, is giving yourself time and space to follow your desire to go and try new things and to listen to that voice of curiosity, and then to give yourself permission and space. Because otherwise we're just always wrapped up with, oh crap, I got to make lunches for the kids for school tomorrow. I got to do this. I got to do that.
How does exploration fit in with technology, especially when we have generative AI? Is there anything really left to explore? Like I
Yeah.
remember, for example, when I would go, before we had Yelp and before we had smartphones and all that sort of stuff, if I would go travel somewhere and visit a country, the way that I would find a restaurant or something cool to do is I would walk along, look for cool restaurants, maybe talk to people. Hey, do you have any recommendations here? Stuff like that. Now, if I want to find a new restaurant or something like that in LA, I go to Eater, I go to infatuation.com, I start reading and searching and scanning and looking at reviews and stuff like that. And I don't know, part of me sometimes feel like the way that we explore is different because I'm not actually out. I'm not, it doesn't feel like true exploring. It just feels like research.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't feel the same.
It's funny you should give that example. I was in LA last weekend, and I was hungry and also wanted to go for a run. So I got on Google and started looking up, and I found Time Out's list of coolest places, cheap places to eat. And I thought, oh, that shrimp taco truck is near my hotel. So I went for a run, and at the midpoint of the run, I ended up at this taco place, and I bought a shrimp taco and ate it, and it was cool. And so on the one hand, I felt really cool that I'd managed to find like the number one place to get a shrimp taco on from this random truck. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, like you said, it was research. There was nothing exploring about that. I looked on the map, and then I was running along with my phone to make sure I could find where this
Yeah,
this
exactly.
taco truck was. So I think, and I think this is true, not just in terms of exploring a new city, but like exploring ideas too, or like thinking about new types of music or art. It's like the algorithms are telling us what to do. Now the algorithms are smart. They give us good advice, and I really like that. That shrimp taco was great. But I think there's something lost if we don't sometimes take a more active role in listening to what's interesting to us. Because algorithms may be smart, but only your brain knows what's new and interesting and worthwhile for you. That's going to resolve uncertainty about the world for you. So it's hard. Like I certainly. Excuse me, I'm certainly not going to renounce, the use of Google Maps or whatever, but I really agree that it's harder to follow your instincts and your curiosity if you're being told at every turn, this is what you're going to like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonder in the workplace too, because we talk about exploration and innovation and stuff like that and wanting to do that. And we're also giving all of our employees these AI tools so they can just get answers to things where, they don't necessarily need to test things out anymore. You could just kind of get, predictive responses and calculations and analysis. So it really makes me wonder what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like, is the exploration aspect going to get killed? And are we just going to become a bunch of, I don't know, researchers who rely on AI and technology tools to just tell us what to do, but we're not really, I don't know, exploring. It's like a very fine line between the exploration and the research piece, but especially in the workplace. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how that balance plays out?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is, look, I'm not an AI expert, so I want to be cautious. Like, I don't want to present myself
Same,
as an
same.
AI expert, but we're talking generative AI and predictive AI. It's based on things people have done before. So it can be a useful tool to follow a path that others have followed in the past. But if you're trying to create a new path, if you're trying to innovate, come up with a new idea or a new concept or a new approach, that's not going to be the way to do that. You're not going to generate value yourself or generate a new approach if you're trying to imitate in an effective and efficient way, it's probably a good approach. If you're trying to innovate and do something new, I don't think it's going to be helpful. And the other thing I would say to that is, it's not just AI. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of lines of evidence suggesting that creativity and innovation have been in decline at least since the 90s or so. So there's standardized tests of creativity that people do on kids on a and they have to regularly renormalize the tests. And if you look at the renormalizations, it's because kids are getting less creative. They're and it's been getting steeper since about 2012 decline. And then if you look more broadly at things like scientific papers and patents, and you ask, how, what proportion of patents are genuinely innovative or breakthrough or do something new, bring together ideas that have never been brought together before, or change the course of a field, the proportion of genuinely innovative patents and scientific papers is decreasing. There's a lot more just incremental advance. So, it's hard to, I don't want to, say that our brains are atrophying or anything like that, but you connect those dots and you say, yeah, we're just kind of following. We now have these tools that make it really easy to follow a path. I mean, maybe the analogy would be to like GPS navigation. We have these tools that enable us to not get lost, and that's great. But if you never get lost, you never discover anything unexpected.
Yeah, that's kind of the tough thing. I mean, do you have any recommendations on how to cultivate that mindset? I mean, especially in the workplace, but I guess if you have that mindset in your personal life, you would also by default kind of have that mindset in the workplace. Like I'm trying to, even myself, I mean, the extent of my curiosity as far as what I can do is, I do try to go to new restaurants. If I am traveling in a certain part of the world, I'll go for long walks. I'll have my Google Maps or something like that with me to just kind of get my bearings, and I'll find like landmarks that I want to go to. So I have the destination that I want to get to, but I don't have a plan. I don't let GPS guide me to the direction. I take my own side streets to kind of get to where I'm going. Sometimes I'll try to listen to new podcasts. I'll connect with new people on X to follow them. So that's kind of the extent of how I try to cultivate curiosity. I think to your point earlier, my kids are the best form of that. Like I'm reading this book on structures. I'm teaching my daughter how to play chess. So she competes in chess tournaments now, and we constantly go through new openings.
Oh, nice.
So I used to play a lot of chess, and I had my own standard openings that I would play, and now she's learning new openings. So it's forcing me out of my comfort zone, so to speak, of how I would usually play. So I don't know, how do we cultivate this curiosity mindset at work? Leaders constantly are trying to ask, how do we do this? Because it drives innovation and creativity. So what do you do?
So I think all the things you said are examples of the kinds of things I would suggest. So for example, I really try not to use turn-by-turn directions in my car unless I have to. And so, and that does mean that sometimes I miss a turn, and I'm driving my kids to a birthday party or something. And this happened a couple of weeks ago. I missed a turn, I was driving them to a hockey game, and we missed a turn. So I was like and my kids are of course piping up in the back, like, why don't you use Waze? Mommy uses Waze. If you used Waze, you wouldn't have missed that turn. And I'm like, kids, we're 30 seconds out of our way. Like, simmer down. What is the great tragedy? We're going to be 10 minutes early and we're 30 seconds late because I missed a turn. But they definitely notice. Yep. But doing that, taking this approach of like knowing where I want to go, checking the directions, but then trying to follow it myself, forces me to look at the world. It forces me to see what the turns are. I can't just sort of wait until the car says turn left. I have to be like, I'm looking for such and such a street, which comes after the big church or whatever like that. And then now I know there's a big church there, and I know what the name of the street is. And so there's a lot of little things we can do like that. And I think the common thread is think about times when efficiency isn't the ultimate goal. So we have all these tools that help us be more efficient in life. And there's lots of situations where if you're driving to the airport, you want to be as efficient as possible. Don't screw around. But there's a lot of situations in life where efficiency is not the right goal. And so if you're at work trying to come up with a new strategy or a new approach, getting 10 ideas as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible is not as useful as getting 3 really unique ideas, 3 ideas that push you in different directions. And so try to fight back against the cult of efficiency and allow yourself to do the metaphorical equivalent of what you're doing when you go to a city and you know where you're trying to get to, but you don't know the route, and you're wandering through the streets and you're figuring it out. Let yourself have some bad ideas and
Mm.
to make some go down the wrong alleyway, and don't worry about your kids saying mommy would have used Waze, because by doing so you're giving yourself an opportunity to find new routes and find new ideas.
Yeah, I read, I don't know if it's true or not, but that if you keep relying on that kind of GPS, it actually like kills a part of your brain. And I found that there was a period of time where even when I was going locally, like I would just by default just put the address into my GPS, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like I know where this is. This is like 10 minutes away from my house. But I would just so instinctually keep putting it into the GPS that I would find that even to just get near my house, I'm following turn by turn directions for no reason. And it just
Exactly
became,
the same thing for me. Yeah.
yeah,
And
it just
and
became a
the
ritual.
rationale is like, at least you'll have the traffic. It'll tell you but it's like, oh, I'm going like 6 blocks. Why am I putting GPS on for this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to your point about the neuroscience, it's like following turn by turn directions, or what's called stimulus response navigation. So even if you're not using GPS, if you're like, I know how to get there, you go 3 blocks this way, then you turn left at the gas station and turn right. That uses a part of your brain called the caudate nucleus. Finding your way by sort of knowing where everything is by what's called cognitive mapping, uses a part of your brain called the hippocampus. So the way you choose to navigate through the world, and this applies to ideas as well as physical landscapes, determines which part of the brain you're using. And technology is helping us not have to use the hippocampus, which is effortful and slow, and we
Yeah.
can rely instead on the caudate nucleus. The problem is, the smaller your hippocampus gets, the higher your risk of a whole bunch of conditions like Alzheimer's and PTSD. A healthy hippocampus is super important for long-term health. We don't need to use our hippocampuses as much. So,
Yeah.
like, this is like, the evidence is too thin to say like, oh, if you use your GPS, you're gonna get dementia. That's not the way it is at this point. But I would say there is a good reason to let yourself get lost sometimes, to use that part of your brain, because the less you use it, the less good you will be at when you need to use it in order to find your way around or to think about new ideas.
So the last two parts I wanted to go over before we wrap up. One is the relationship between exploration and failure. And the other one is knowing when to explore, right? Because if you're, maybe you have a huge client project that you've been asked to work on, big deadline, you're competing against others, and if you guys win the deal, it becomes a make or break moment for the company. Maybe at that point, it might not be a good idea to explore and try something totally radical and totally new. Or, if you're a doctor or if you're a pilot, you don't want to try like a new method of doing something. So how do you know when it makes sense to explore and try and do something off the beaten path? And also, how do you deal with failure? Because oftentimes I find that if people explore and they fail, they tend to not want to do it again, right? And you kind of get that default, I knew I shouldn't have done that. I screwed up. I'm never going to do it again. And then you just stay on that fixed path and you don't explore anymore. So can you talk a little bit about those two things, knowing when to explore and then the difference and the balance between exploration and failure?
Yeah. So knowing when to explore is, there's no simple formula, right? Like it depends on a lot of factors, but there's some general things to keep in mind, which actually links to the question of failure too. There's a lot of math. There's been like a half century of mathematical investigations trying to figure out what is the algorithm that tells you when it becomes favorable to explore rather than exploit. And it's super complicated, but one of the approaches that gives the best results it's something called the upper confidence bound algorithm, but it's often referred to as optimism in the face of uncertainty. And what this is telling you is, when you're making a choice between exploring and exploiting, or just making a choice between two options, you want to look at the realistic upside. What's the best case scenario? Not the like, if lightning struck, this might happen, but there's a reasonable chance of this turning out well. Which option is going to be better? And what it turns out is that if you have that sort of optimistic approach to like, yeah, this one has the better, like, best case scenario, then you won't always get it right. You will sometimes fail. You'll encounter failure, because nobody has a crystal ball. You can never know. There's inherent uncertainty in these choices. But what you will do, is minimize regret. You will basically, and this is a mathematical quantity. Regret is the difference between the outcome you got and the outcome you could have had if you'd magically made the right choice.
Yeah.
So since we can't always make the right choice, we will always have regret. But you will minimize regret by choosing optimistically. Now, this is a mathematical statement, but it's also an intuitive statement. Like when you look back, do you regret not asking that girl to dance, or do you regret the time that you asked and she said no? Like, you're more likely to regret the options you left undone by the chances you didn't take. So this isn't a universal rule. So to your example of like an important client presentation and stuff, you also have to think about the stakes. Like, what happens if I get this wrong? You know, I lose my job and I end up living in a van down by the river. Okay, maybe this isn't the time to take the chance. But think about what the upside is. Like, if you're taking a chance in this presentation, is it because if they agree with your idea, it's going to radically alter the trajectory of the company? Then maybe it's worth taking a chance. If it's just like, oh, I had this other idea that we've never tried before, maybe we should try it just for the heck of trying it. That's not a amazing upside. So you think, but the message I think people should keep in mind is that on average, being optimistic in the face of uncertainty minimizes regret.
I like that. That's a simple way to think about that. And then with dealing with failure, if you make a mistake.
First of all, like, not to be like brusque about it, but like, deal with it. Like, you know,
Life goes on.
It's a part of life. Like, and it's like the meal, when I was talking earlier about the restaurant data, the food delivery data, you get a bad meal sometimes. You can cry about it, or you can reframe it as, okay, this is the price I pay to get better meals in the long run. Because if I wasn't willing to accept getting a bad meal now and then, it means I'm going to just keep ordering from the same 3 places that I've been eating at since 2018. Instead, I'm taking a chance so that I can continually find better places. And the price is sometimes you get a bad meal. And so I think, I think you maybe to turn it around and say, if you're not encountering failure, if you don't make some choices that turn out badly, it's like downhill skiing. I remember the first time I went downhill skiing and I came home and I was like, I didn't fall at all. And my uncle was like, well, that means you didn't push yourself. Like, how are you going to learn if you're not pushing yourself to the point that you fall sometimes? And that stayed with me. This is like 40 years ago. And I'm like, oh yeah, you got to fall on the ski hill sometimes. Otherwise you don't know, you're not pushing your limits. And same with failure. If you don't fail now and then, it's a sign that you're not coming anywhere close to your, to pushing your limits or learning new things.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, but I always tell people, right, it comes to vulnerability as well. You know, people say, what happens if I'm vulnerable and it gets used against me? But you have to be vulnerable when you ask somebody out on a date, when you ask for a promotion, when you ask for more money, when you ask for a job. And you're going to get told so many times in your life that if you stop doing whatever it is that you were doing every time you were told no or something didn't go your way, you'd be a shell of your former self. So to your point, you can't let those things be the end all be all. You just have to learn from them and kind of keep going. And just because somebody says you can't get a promotion, does that mean you're never going to ask for a promotion or more money ever again? I would hope not. All right. That's going to really stunt your career development. So I love that approach of just you kind of get over it, learn what you can, and kind of move on to the next thing. I feel like there's so much more we can even talk about. I can't believe the hour already went by so quickly. That's what happened. I mean, I'm really interested in kind of the fitness and science aspect of it too, and the relationship there with leadership. So I'm glad we were able to touch on that. But where can people go to learn more about you, your book, your newsletter? You have a column. You write in so many different places. Where can people go to connect with you?
So my website is alexhutchinson.net. And from there are links to all that good stuff. I write a column once a week for Outside Magazine about the latest research in fitness. But yeah, you can find links to that from alexhutchinson.net.
Very cool. Alex, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jacob. This was a really fun conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com @BOOKMARKS.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.